In the high-pressure world of voice acting, Leon Miranda and Carlos Montero are forced to work together on a passionate romance audio drama that demands breathy whispers, emotional confessions, and dangerously intimate scenes. Known for constantly competing for the same roles, the two actors enter the studio determined to outshine each other. But as the recording sessions grow more intense, the lines between scripted love and real feelings begin to blur. Under the bright studio lights and behind the microphone, their rivalry slowly transforms into something neither of them expected, something far more personal. Will their emotions stay part of the performance, or will the truth finally break free from the script?
Chapter 1: The Casting Announcement. The recording studio smelled faintly of coffee and warm electronics, the familiar scent of long sessions and tired voice actors. Leon Miranda leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, watching through the studio glass as the director adjusted microphones. Leon was known for two things in the industry: his deep, velvety voice and his equally deep arrogance. He had won awards, voiced countless hit dramas, and built a reputation as the actor who could deliver raw emotion with a single breath. But today, his attention wasn't on the microphone. It was on the man walking through the door. Carlos Montero. Tall, calm, irritatingly handsome. Carlos had entered the voice acting scene 3 years ago and immediately started stealing roles Leon thought belonged to him. Commercials, anime leads, audio dramas, even awards. Their rivalry had become legendary among studio staff. Carlos set his bag down casually and glanced at Leon through the glass booth. Their eyes met. Leon raised an eyebrow. Carlos smirked. "Great," Leon muttered under his breath. "It's him." The director clapped her hands together. "All right, everyone, listen up." The small group of staff gathered around. "This project is going to be our biggest audio drama yet, a high-budget romance series with full cinematic sound design." Leon barely listened until the next sentence dropped. "And our leads will be Leon Miranda and Carlos Montero." The room went silent. Leon sat up straight. Carlos tilted his head. "Together?" Leon said slowly. The director happily nodded. "You two will be voicing the main couple." Carlos chuckled softly. "Well," he said, glancing at Leon, "this should be interesting." Leon stared back. Interesting wasn't the word he would have chosen.
Chapter 2: First Recording. The script was thick. Too thick. Leon flipped through the pages, realizing just how much emotional dialogue there was. Confessions, arguments, long, intimate monologues. And then there were the whisper scenes. He frowned. "This is very intense," Leon said. Carlos leaned over the desk, skimming the same pages. "It's a romance," he replied lightly. "What did you expect?" Leon glanced at him. "I expected a different co-star." Carlos smiled lazily. "Likewise." The director's voice came through the speakers. "All right, let's start with scene 4. The scene description made Leon pause. Two characters trapped in a quiet room after a confession they both regret. Carlos stepped up to the microphone beside him. Their shoulders nearly brushed. Leon suddenly became very aware of how close they were. "Whenever you're ready," the director said. Leon began reading. His voice lowered, soft and controlled. "I shouldn't have said that, but I can't take it back." Carlos responded immediately, his voice shifting into character, gentle, wounded. "Then don't." Leon blinked slightly. Carlos leaned closer to the microphone. "And don't pretend you didn't mean it." The studio went quiet, except for their voices. The tension in the script felt strangely real. Leon forgot for a moment that they were acting. Carlos's voice dropped into a whisper. "Say it again." Leon swallowed. The line felt too personal. Still, he read it. "I want you." When the director called cut, no one spoke for a second. Leon slowly looked at Carlos.
Carlos looked back. Something about the moment lingered, something neither of them acknowledged.
Chapter 3: The Whisper Scene. A week later, they reached the infamous scene. Even the director looked amused. "This scene relies heavily on proximity," she explained. "The characters are extremely close. Think breath-level whispers." Leon rubbed his temple. Carlos looked far too entertained. "Problem?" Carlos asked. "No," Leon said quickly. Carlos stepped toward the microphone. "Good." The script directions read, "Their foreheads nearly touching, their voices barely louder than breath." The director gestured. "Go." Carlos started. "You're shaking." Leon answered, "Because you're too close." Carlos lowered his voice further. "That never stopped you before." Leon felt a strange heat creep up his neck. Carlos leaned slightly closer. "Look at me." The line wasn't in the script. Leon blinked. Carlos was still acting, but the intensity in his eyes made Leon's chest tighten. Leon forced himself to continue. "You're impossible." Carlos whispered the next line slowly. "And yet you keep coming back." Their voices blended in the quiet studio. The director whispered from the control room, "Perfect, keep going." But Leon barely heard her. All he could hear was Carlos's breathing beside him. Chapter 4: After Hours. The session ended late. Everyone left except Leon and Carlos. Leon gathered his script pages while Carlos leaned against the table. "You did well today," Carlos said casually. Leon glanced at him. That sounded almost like a compliment. Carlos shrugged. "Maybe it was." Leon frowned. "You hate me." Carlos chuckled softly. "I never said that." "Please, you've been competing with me for years." Carlos looked thoughtful. "Competition doesn't mean hatred." Leon paused. Carlos pushed off the table. "In fact," he said quietly, "sometimes rivalry just means someone finally met their equal." Leon stared at him. Carlos grabbed his bag. "See you tomorrow, Leon." As Carlos walked out, Leon felt something strange settle in his chest. For the first time, their rivalry didn't feel entirely hostile. Chapter 5: The Confession Scene. 2 weeks into recording, they reached the emotional climax of the script, a love confession. The director looked excited. "This is the most important scene in the series." Leon took a breath. Carlos stood beside him again. The line began. Carlos spoke first. "I tried to hate you." Leon answered quietly. "And?" Carlos looked at him. "It didn't work." Leon's next line caught in his throat. The script said, "Because I love you." But the way Carlos was looking at him made the words feel dangerously real. Leon finally said it. "Because I love you." The room fell silent. Carlos's response came softer than expected. "I know." The director whispered through the speakers, "That was perfect." But Leon couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Chapter 6: Blurred Lines. Recording sessions became different. Their performances grew more natural, more intimate. Sometimes they improvised lines. Sometimes they stood closer than necessary. Staff began noticing. Leon noticed too. One afternoon, Carlos leaned against the booth wall. "You're thinking too much," he said. Leon sighed. "This project is messing with my head." Carlos smirked. "Because you're falling for your character?" Leon met his gaze. "Or because I'm starting to sound like him?" Carlos didn't answer. Chapter 7: The Breaking Point. The rivalry resurfaced during a press interview. A reporter asked, "So which of you is the better actor?" Leon answered first. "I am." Carlos laughed. "You wish." The tension returned. Later, during recording, their arguments spilled into the scene. The emotions were raw, real, and when Leon shouted his line, "Why do you keep pushing me away?" Carlos answered with unexpected intensity, "Because if I don't—" He stopped. The script didn't have that line. Leon stared. Carlos looked away. Forget it. But Leon understood. Too late. Chapter 8. Truth in the Script. The next recording session was quiet. Carlos avoided eye contact until they reached the final scene, a quiet confession. Carlos read his lines slowly. "You were never just a rival to me." Leon's heart pounded. Carlos continued, "You were the only one who ever understood me." The words were scripted, but the way Carlos said them, Leon knew they weren't just acting. Chapter 9. The Last Recording. The final scene required a whispered goodbye. Carlos read the last line, "Stay with me." Leon responded, "I already have." The director called cut. Applause filled the studio. The series was finished. But Leon looked at Carlos. Something unfinished remained. Chapter 10. Off Script. The studio was empty again, just like the first day. Leon spoke first. "So, what now?" Carlos stepped closer. "No script." Leon crossed his arms. "That sounds dangerous." Carlos smiled. "Maybe." Then he said quietly, "You know that confession scene?" Leon nodded. Carlos looked directly into his eyes. That wasn't acting. Leon's heart skipped. After months of rivalry, tension, and whispered lines, the truth had finally stepped out from behind the script. And this time, there were no microphones, only them, and the silence waiting for Leon's answer.